everybody. Welcome to our event today. It's an event where we'll be speaking about Tanzania, this wonderful country. We'll be talking about things going on in Tanzania, but we'll be doing it through the medium of paying tribute to somebody who really cared about Tanzania. So somebody who spent his entire life on Tanzania, his entire life on Africa, indeed, his entire life on the world, the planet, the poor people, and also his own field, economics. So I'd like to thank you all for being here. The person we are honoring, of course, is Professor Benno Ndulu. And I know wherever he is right now, he's going to be very, very happy that all of you in the audience, and definitely those who are speaking today, have been able to be here to say a few words about him, but also about his beloved country, Tanzania. My name is Yao Nyako. I'm a professor of economics here at New York University. I am the director of NYU's Africa House, and also with my colleagues, Professor Bill Easterly and Rajiv Deheji, I am the co-director of the Development Research Institute. And these are the institute's bodies hosting this event today. So what's going to happen is we have a wonderful set of speakers who are all going to speak to Benno, speak about Benno, but via his work on Tanzania. We already have some questions from audience members about Benno and ICT, and we have some questions for His Excellency. I'll come to that a little bit later on, but a wonderful lineup. So my job is I'm just going to be introducing and making some remarks of my own about Benno in between the various conversations, okay? He's been a good friend of ours for quite a while now. I have known him most of my professional life, somebody who I admire and adore tremendously. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be introducing the speakers one after the other. In the interest of time, I will not be making lengthy introductions, just so that you can hear directly from the speakers and not me about the speakers. We have on the chat, I believe, you have the bios of each of the speakers, so you can get the full details of each person in the chat. And if you have questions, of course, put it everything in the chat as well. And the instructions and everything are on the chat. Okay, so let me move immediately. And it's with great honor, I'd like to introduce a family that has been very, very helpful to me ever since I moved to New York a few decades ago. They've taken me as a member of their family. I've visited with them often. And most of the things we do about Africa at NYU Africa House has been with their support. I should mention just yesterday with the family, we were hosting the ambassador, permanent representative to the UN of South Africa. It was a just wonderful event. Lots of people made her feel very, very at home in the city. I remember, I think it's more than a decade ago, we had President Zuma come in when he was president of the African National Congress before his years as president of South Africa. Eddie Bergman, I shouldn't have mentioned his name, but Africa Travel Association, we've been working tremendously with them. They have a wonderful foundation organization, Miracle Corners of the World, doing spectacular work in Africa and particularly in Tanzania. And Henry Schein, the company, have been doing so much great work with us. And so a big shout out to Team Schein, as they're called. The family has been great. And before I introduce them to speak, I also want to mention that the last time I met with Benno, my good friend, this was pre-COVID years, was actually at a lunch at their house, their wonderful house. They invited us and my colleague, Bill Easterly, Paul Roma was there. And I remember predicting at that time that he was going to win the Nobel Prize in economics. And so everybody now thinks of me as some juju man. Come for lunch at this house and you will win the prize if I, put my wand over you. And so that's the last time I actually met Benno Ndulu. So all of this is to say, I'd like to welcome the Bergman family, They've been so nice to me, so nice to Africa House. And Stan and Marion, you see them on the screen now. I think Eddie Bergman is in the background somewhere. Thank you for all you do for Africa House. And please, over to you and make some remarks. And I think you're introducing the next speaker. So Stan and Marion, thank you very much for all you do. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Nyako. Thank you, Yao. It's so good to see everyone. Yes, we remember that lunch very fondly. And actually, Yao, I'm hoping that somebody on the screen today is going to be getting the Nobel Prize. So we're counting on you to make sure that somebody on the screen is well positioned.
All right, I'll point on somebody.
I have to say, it's an honor to be here with this group. His Excellency, former President Jakaya Kikwete, Dr. Ndulu, our good friend Obi Ezekwesili, Professor William Easterly, Professor Stephen O'Connell, and yes, to honor our good friend Professor Benno J. Ndulu. Through the late Professor Ndulu's research and teaching, an illustrious career, he was really a champion for African economic growth and a big loss to the continent. And it's in that context that we are such big supporters of the work of Yao. Of course, our son Eddie has been involved with NYU as an alum. He's been involved with NYU for over 2 decades and was there at the founding with Yao of Africa House. Eddie's been involved on a detailed basis. Of course, people know that Mary and I, 4 years ago, came to this great country from Africa 4 decades ago. And NYU has been, for us, the place to connect Africa to the United States. NYU Africa House has been a bridge builder between Africa and the rest of the world, but in particular, the United States, where there's not always a clear understanding of the importance of Africa. There is no question that the success of the global economy is inextricably connected to growth and development in Africa, and the continent's promise is extraordinary. We know that by the middle of the century, nearly 1 in 4 people in the world will be African, with more than half of the population aged 25 and younger. Africa is the youngest continent in the world and will soon be the home of the largest workforce. We need to understand this. We need to make sure that Americans understand this. As the former or the late Secretary General Kofi Annan once said, Africa's resilience and creativity are enormous. It has a rising and energetic youth and a dynamic group of entrepreneurs who are transforming people's lives. It is time to unlock this huge potential. This was Benno's work. This is what he focused on. All of us here today know well that unlocking Africa's enormous potential depends on building bridges through interchange, dialogue, and partnerships. This is precisely what Yao and his team, Andrea, are doing at Africa House at NYU. Under Professor Nyako's exceptional leadership, NYU's Africa House has made important strides in advancing an understanding of Africa, linking Africa to the United States by engaging students, academics, world leaders, and the general public. The key economic, political, and social issues on the continent are magnified and explained to the American public, and specifically in this great city of New York, which is really a global city. So with that in mind, I'm asking Marion to introduce our next speaker, President Kikwete, who Marion has worked with closely for many years. Marion, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome a longtime friend to our family and the NYU family and the inspiration for NYU Africa House, His Excellency, Dr. Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete. Dr. Kikwete served as President of the United Republic of Tanzania from 2005 to 2015 and was instrumental in championing a development agenda that focused on women, children, and public health. During his time in office, President Kikwete served as the co-chair of the UN Commission of Information and Accountability on Women's and Children's Health. He was chairperson of the UN's high-level panel on the global response to health crisis, and also chairperson of the African Leaders Malaria Alliance. Since his retirement, President Kikwete has assumed numerous leadership roles, including the co-chairmanship of the UN High-Level Advisory Group on Every Woman, Every Child. He is a member of the UN Lead Group on Scaling Up Nutrition. He is a global ambassador for immunization and a member of the End Malaria Council, commissioner of the International Education Commission for Financing Global Education Opportunity. He is co-chair of the World Refugee Council and the African Union High-Level Representative on Libya, and chairman of his own foundation, Jakaya Mrisho Kikwete Foundation. I don't know how he has time for all of this. Our family has had the privilege of first getting to know President Kikwete through our involvement with Miracle Corners of the World, MCW, a youth empowerment organization and leadership organization co-founded by our son, Eddie. I am a retired intensive care doctor and pulmonary specialist. And in 2006, following my graduate studies in midlife at the NYU Wagner School of Public Policy, I made my career change to work in the nonprofit sector, mostly as a volunteer and working closely with the oral public health sector in Tanzania to help shape the direction of MCW's oral health projects there in collaboration with the people of Tanzania. It was President Kikwete's passion to improve oral health of the Tanzanian people. And he's the one who motivated us to become involved in this endeavor. And he has understood and continues to understand the importance of good oral health with respect to good overall health. That is what enabled MCW and its private and public sector partners to help improve the oral health status of Tanzania and strengthen the nation's oral health workforce through capacity upgrades at the Muhimbili University of Health and Allied Sciences Dental School in Dar-es-Salaam, as well as various dental outreach education and training of young people in various regions of the country. So,
thank you, Marian. So in 2018, President Kikwete brought the same passion and commitment to his productive engagement with NYU Africa House when he joined as the inaugural former African president in residence for the 3 months residency, an initiative that our family has been very pleased to help Yao undertake and support the whole idea of these residencies. His residency was instrumental in building a robust program for engaging former heads of state in the intellectual life of Africa House and enabling these former heads of state to work with Africa House researchers and faculty and interact with a number of NYU community members, while also documenting their time in public office. During his residency at Africa House, President Kikwete collaborated with members of the NYU community to write his memoirs entitled The Journey of My Life, From a Barefoot Schoolboy to President, which reflects on President Kikwete's 40 years in public service, his ascension to the presidency, a great presidency when he served that, leadership skills for the next generation of leaders, and his vision for the future of Africa. President Kikwete also shared his vast knowledge and experiences with faculty, students, and various departments across the university, and further developed the ongoing engagement with NYU's College of Nursing, facilitated by MCW. It is indeed my great honor to spend this time with you all. Mary and I are really appreciative of Yao for putting this together to spotlight the importance of Tanzania, the importance of Africa, and to honor our dear friend's life. Welcome, President Kikwete.
Well, thank you very much, Marion and Stan Bergman, for the introduction about me and for the kind words you have said about me. But at some point, I'll have to retaliate and say how good you guys are. You're a wonderful family. You are a wonderful people, very supportive. You have a great heart. Well, I commend Professor Yao Nyako for organizing this panel discussion on reflection on Tanzania in honor of Professor Benno Ndulu at the NYU's Africa House. Well, I sincerely thank the organizers for associating me with this historic event. Professor Benno Ndulu and I came a long way. We first met and got acquainted at the University of Dar-es-Salaam in 1972, when I was a freshman and he was a sophomore. We used to talk regularly. We became friends, and we used to talk regularly on academic and other matters of interest about the university, the country, Africa, and the world. In the discussion, I discerned that Benno was a well-rounded person, highly knowledgeable, with very sharp mind, with a very sharp mind. Benno is a big brain and a genius. I used to tell him that one day in future, he will become a prominent academic. But of course, in retaliation, probably maybe not feel comfortable with what I said. He says, I think you'll also become a big politician. So we laughed it off. But we both shared passion for economics, particularly economics of agriculture and rural development. When I left the university in 1975 to join public service, he was already an employee of the university as a tutorial assistant in the economics department. That was to be the beginning of his illustrious academic career, which climaxed in his becoming a prominent professor of economics. My prophecy came to pass, as did his on my political journey. After we parted company in 1975, little did I know that someday in life, I will be in a position which will need the services of Benno Ndulu. And also I'll be in a position that I will be responsible for bringing Benno Ndulu back to Tanzania, give him a center stage in Tanzania's development agenda. After a long career in the party, the ruling party, and Tanzania's military, in 1988, I was appointed by President Ali Hassan Mwinyi, our second president, to his cabinet. I started as a deputy minister. In 1990, I became minister for water, deputy minister for energy and minerals. 1990, minister for water, energy and minerals. In 1994, he appointed me to be his finance minister. I became finance minister at a very challenging time. Major donors had suspended aid to Tanzania because of being unhappy with what they considered to be our government's failure to collect its revenues for reasons of maladministration and corruption. So my president tasked me to do three things. First, to restore relations with the donors. Two, get aid flowing back again to Tanzania. And three, strengthen government revenue collection systems. Let me talk about the last. I pioneered the reform of the government revenue collection system and its architecture. We conceived the idea of establishing a new tax administration institution and introduced new tax governance systems. We succeeded to pass through Parliament a legislation which established the Tanzania Revenue Authority in 1995. To underline the semi-autonomous character, because I wanted this institution to be semi-autonomous. To underline that, we created in the legislation a board of directors to provide leadership, guidance, and oversight of the running and management of the revenue institution. The first board was tasked, therefore, was given the task of building strong foundation of the new institution. The board had to create the revenue collection systems, build structures, operating systems, and personnel, and hire personnel. In view of this critical task of building a strong foundation, we needed a strong chairman of the board, a visionary chairman, and competent members of the board. For the position of the chairman, I thought of nobody else other than my good friend, Professor Benno J. At that time, Benno was working at the African Economic Research Consortium in Nairobi, Kenya. He was the executive director. So I reached out to him, made the request. I said, this is going to be chairing the board. It's not going to be a full-time job. He agreed. After getting an agreement with him, I recommended him to the president, who concurred with my proposal and appointed Benno to be the first chairman of the new institution called the Tanzania Revenue Authority. Benno did not disappoint. Under his able leadership, a strong foundation was built, which created the high-performing revenue institution we have today in Tanzania. In the 10 years I was foreign minister, I did not have serious interactions with Professor Benno. When I became president in 2005, I used to consult Benno Ndulu regularly to get his wise counsel on promoting sound economic growth and development policies and measures in Tanzania. But I also asked him to help me identify a person who would be a good economic advisor for me. Benno recommended Dr. Philip Mpango, who happened to be one of his former students. And Dr. Mpango at that time was working with the World Bank at the Dar-es-Salaam office. So I told Benno, you talk to him. If he's ready, I'm going to have him. He was ready, and I appointed him to be my chief economic advisor. Later, I hired another student of Benno, Dr. Mwalimu Nyerere, who was teaching at the University of Dar-es-Salaam. Again, of course, I took another young lady from the Central Bank, a very bright Tanzanian, AERC Kanza. Dr. Philip Mpango, Mwalimu Nyerere, AERC Kanza were a great team of economic advisors. They helped me in the conception of economic policies and measures we took in managing the economic life of Tanzania. Later, AERC Kanza was poached by the World Economic Forum. I appointed Dr. Nyerere later to become Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance. Later, he ended up being Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy. Dr. Philip Mpango is now the Vice President of Tanzania. And before that, he was the Finance Minister. Both Dr. Mpango and Nyerere were students of Benno. So you can tell he had those magic hands which tended to dazzle anything that he nurtured, be it people, ideas, or an institution. One day when I was president, Dr. Daudi Balali, who was the central bank governor at that time, came to me to request me to appoint another deputy governor for the bank. Without hesitation, I proposed to him that let that man be Benno Ndulu, professor. He welcomed the idea wholeheartedly. In fact, Dr. Balali said, because Benno is a prominent economist, he would be of great benefit to the central bank. I thought at that time, this was the time, I thought that was the time now to bring Benno back home to serve his motherland directly. I whispered to him about my intention. Well, he unreservedly accepted. Well, I did not expect that to be easy, very easy, because it meant losing his better paying job, prestigious position. That time he was working with Obi when she was vice president of the bank. I remember we met with Obi in Accra, and I told her about my intentions. Well, she was not quite happy, but she said, as long as you think he's going to be useful for the country, that's our country, you have him. I thank you, Obi. So in fact, Benno told me that for the service of his country, he will take up the job. So I appointed him deputy governor of the bank. Sadly, not long thereafter, we lost Dr. Balali, the governor, to illness. So I made Benno the governor of the central bank, January 7th, 2008. His was one of those appointments I made during my time in office that I look back with a great sense of pride. As usual, Professor Ndulu did not disappoint. He managed the affairs of the central bank so well, which won him recognition with the bank staff in the country and beyond our borders. I have no doubt in my mind that he will be remembered as having been one of the best governors in the history of the Tanzanian Central Bank. He made me and Tanzania proud. Professor Benno Ndulu was a very hardworking person who put his high caliber intellect, his knowledge and experience to good use and for the benefit of our country and its people. He always told me and the cabinet honest and carefully thought through advice which had the best interests of the country. He was quite fair. And he did not hesitate to say no to things he felt to be harmful. However, he always did that with much humility. He says, please, sir, but how can't we do this way? That is was his way of saying no. Then you know here the professor is saying no. But also in his usual soft tone. And I did respect him for that. He was an incredibly open-minded person, but a good listener to other people's views. And one of the things he's credited at the bank, at the central bank, is that he would listen. He was not the boss type. He would say, no, I know that. I know that. No. Benno would always listen to other people's views. In the other sense, he was a good follower. He embodied the qualities of a good leader. Because a good leader is a good listener. At the same time, he is a good follower. Under his able leadership, Bank of Tanzania guided well our country's monetary and fiscal policies, and never shied away from taking bold actions, measures which translated into the strong macroeconomic performance and stability we enjoyed during my presidency. It explains why our economy then maintained a steady GDP growth of 6.9 around 6.9 in the 10 years I was president, and inflation at single digit. There was time it went up to 4, but it was always around 6.1. And we came to 6.1 from around 18. So he did a tremendous job from huge inflation numbers to that point. Benno was not only President Ndulu, Professor Ndulu was not only after numbers and graphs, as many typical economists do, but also he was after what those numbers and graphs actually meant to people's lives. He always had in his mind the well-being of that last common man in the street. For that reason, when he came to me with the idea of promoting financial inclusion, I could trust his guts. I gave him a blank check to proceed. The rest is not only history, as we used to say, but a success story. Benno Ndulu took the risk and granted mobile phone companies with enough space and flexibility to help with the provision of financial services to people who could not be reached by the traditional banking services. The decision that Benno took led to increase in financial inclusion from 16% in 2009 to 65% in 2018 when he retired. This was a phenomenal achievement. It was made possible when Benno allowed mobile network to compete and provide fintech solutions that helped to reach more people in the far to reach areas. Had we waited for the banks to do that, it would have taken us much longer, since in the same span of time, banks increased access from 9% to 16.7%. Benno was able to do it from 16 to 67 to 65%. A financial inclusion framework, which was launched during his tenure, had two phases. The first phase was focused on mainly increasing access to financial services. And the second phase focused on the use of financial products. Benno's advice for the government to allow the interoperability among mobile network operators was very revolutionary. It made it possible and easy for customers to move money from one service provider to another. That attracted many people to use financial services. It also led to improved efficiency in payments to utilities by customers, because now you can pay your electricity bills, your water bills to utilities using the mobile phone. It later encouraged the government to introduce e-payment through government portal with the use of control numbers. You can pay your bills these days using a mobile phone. You can pay taxes using a mobile phone. The results are evident. Transparency and efficiency in collection of government revenues was increased. Nuances in paying government taxes and fees that encourage corruption were grossly reduced. It also helped to semi-formalize our huge informal sector. And most important, people's lives have been made easy. Enough to say that Benno's life did a lot to us, possibly than what we did individually to him. Through his work, he nurtured many and impacted so many lives of people he never even met. His conviction of impacting the last person at the very last mile made a whole lot of difference. It also distinguished him from many. I could say Benno Ndulu was just Benno Ndulu. one of those good people in our lives that are in short supply. Personally, I am grateful for the important part he played to my presidency. If it were not for Benno, the story of my presidency, especially a track record of macroeconomic stability and impressive growth and transformation of the socio-economic landscape of Tanzania, could not be told as it has been and continues to be told today. I'm so much indebted to my good friend, Benno, Professor Benno Ndulu. I could go on and on to talk about Professor Benno Ndulu. This Benno meant so much to so many people in so many ways. And for many of us, we knew him and associated with him with great things. We associate with him with great things. His name was always behind many successes and became synonymous with greatness. The lineup of heavyweight speakers present here today in itself is very telling about the greatness of Professor Benno Ndulu. Wisdom therefore demands that I let others to share their insights of the stories too, or else I risk being unfair to him and to you all. Let me say as the last word, Benno left us. His legacy should not and shall not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really thank you for your warm words. And I know you had other meetings at this time, and just wanted to thank you for saying all of this. And I know Benno will be very, very happy that you were able to make it. So, Mr. President, thank you. And
Thank you
for all of you listening, Mr. President has agreed to be with us in the fall semester. His book will be finished, and he will be publicizing it at NYU Africa House. So thank you, Mr. President. All right, so we're moving right along, and I know time is moving very quickly. Let me just recognize Indulika, Lindu, and Sarah, the children of Benno Ndulu. So to the three of you, Benno was very special to us, and we're very happy you can be here to listen to the comments, especially from His Excellency and all those before and after. So moving right along, and I'm going to really ask our speakers to stick to the between 5 and 7 minutes. I will interrupt if you go beyond that. I think next we were supposed to have Njuguna speak, but he's not here. Let me just say that Njuguna Ndungu is the executive director of the African Economic Research Council, AERC. And with Benno, he was actually at an event, maybe 2013 at our NYU Abu Dhabi campus, when he was beginning to think about mobile money payments and other things that His Excellency, the President, just spoke about. So Njuguna may join us later on, but let's move right on. And she needs no introduction. Dr. Abi Ekwesili, economic policy expert, senior economic advisor, Africa Economic Development Policy Initiative. And all of you have her bio there. Former Nigerian Minister of Education, and also at the World Bank. So Obi, over to you. And since we're running a little bit late, I'll ask you to the 5 to 7 minutes. I know you have a lot of wonderful things to say about our good friend Benno and also of Tanzania. So over to you. And Obi, thank you so much for making the time to be with us. Okay, Obi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Yao, and hello to Mr. President. Thank you very much for those kind words, very meaningful words that you spoke concerning Benno. Hello to my co-speakers, especially my dear family in New York, the Bergmans, Stan and Marion. Always a pleasure to be in the same setting with you. I want to state, first of all, that in the loss of Benno, I lost a brother, I lost a friend, I lost an advisor, and I lost one of the most brilliant minds out of our continent in the field of economics. The first thing to say is that, yes, indeed, Mr. President was right. It was tough for me to watch Benno leave J Building, where he was my advisor and the manager of partnership and capacity development program at that time. As one who had joined the bank from the outside, I needed people like Benno who knew the bank in the inside and who clearly understood my own passion for change. I joined the bank and I did not want the bank to stay the same in the way that it was working with our continent. I wanted a bank that understood the continent and enabled the continent the space to shape its thinking in terms of its development. I found comradeship in Benno in that regard. Everything that we went on to do together stands as a testament to the fact that the period that Benno and myself worked together as a team was also the period that a stronger partnership with Africa happened. And I believe that President Kikwete would attest to that, you know, we basically decided that Africa was not simply going to be a client or you know, or some continent that that is helped by the bank. We decided to frame Africa as a partner with the bank, and the partnership became a resource that both sides could leverage in order to generate the kind of economic growth that Benno really wanted. And that takes me to the second part of Benno, this emphasis on economic growth, but not just economic growth. He loved the fact that I put a lot of emphasis on growth that the citizens of the continent could share, the growth that they could actually evidence by virtue of you know, what impact it made on them. And so Benno would always tease me and say, the client is no longer in Africa, the client is the VP at the World Bank, you know. So he said the way that I would forcefully argue the necessity for us to you know, design our programs in ways that we could measure the impact on the citizens was being a strong voice for the people of the continent. And he loved that very much. So Benno was one of my hype men. I have to tell you that. He hyped me to no end. If I finished a meeting with our partners from the continent and the meeting was a good meeting, Benno would come into my office immediately and he would give me 2 thumbs up, and I knew that, okay, so we got that right then. So he really was a brother in every sense of the word. The third thing that I want to say about Benno is a stickler for integrity of action. And so this matter of you know, making sure that public policy is underpinned by this sense that you have a responsibility to your citizens, that your citizens must see not just your intention to do right things, but that they actually can say you've done the right things. And so he was a compatriot to me in ensuring that economic governance and economic policy was designed to make not the leaders of the continent have a good life, but for the people of the continent to benefit from the sound economic policies. I loved that very much about Benno, and I would forever remember him for that. And the fourth point is that Benno cared about the successor generation. And so many of the young Africans at the bank, once they came in, one of the things that I would do if I found them would be to say, go and speak to Benno, because he knew the bank. He could help them in organizing their thoughts as well as their career path within the bank. And so that was why it was painful in a way for me to have lost him at the time I did. But guess what? What was important for me was that Benno was going home. And when Benno went home, and you know, I saw the difference it made in terms of the economic policy choices that Tanzania began to make. And one thing that was very important for me at that time was that Tanzania was began to grow, but poverty was not reducing in a commensurate way. And so we became curious about that and began to look for the for what were the barriers to the growth not leading to reduction in poverty. And it was incredible how we ended up identifying the key blocks, the barriers to growth that was inclusive, growth that was shared, growth that was really broad-based. And as we identified them, and President Kikwete was very open. I mean, it was good to have at the presidency someone who understood economics, which was an important point that we always made for the people on the continent, that you cannot simply be a politician with no knowledge of economics. You will destroy the country on the back of some populist agenda. And Benno and I shared the same attitude. And Benno's abiding faith in the basic principles of economics. And so, yes, he was very African in his orientation, but no, Benno would not indulge in that silly kind of economics upside down that people would do in order to be populist. He refused to be part of that. I loved that about him, but he challenged the orthodoxy of simply just doing economics in the way that you would do elsewhere. So I understood Benno to have been someone that I really enjoyed working with. And, we really had a personal bonding that I will forever cherish. I have to tell you that tears dropped when I heard of Benno's passing, because I was hoping that somewhere as life does, that we would again come together and continue to work closely to push the remaining agenda for the development of our continent. May the family of Benno take delight in the fact that he left such incredible legacy. I could talk of Benno all through this meeting. You haven't given me enough time to do that, but even for the amount of time that I've spoken, you can see that my heart cries for the loss of a dear brother and a friend that I will always remember.
Thank you. Thank you, Obi. That was very nice and warm of you. Really appreciate that. Okay, just so you all see, I have on the comments here a great comment from one of our professors. I won't mention her name unless she allows me, but she says to the speakers that the conversation has been so good, wonderful, that she actually wants us to write it all up so that she can work on a project where we create a book or a manuscript in honor of Benno, okay? So I'll be asking you all for permission later on. I see His Excellency has showing us the comments there. He'll give it to us. And so to the professor who said that, I'm getting a thumbs up so far. And so wonderful idea, okay? Wonderful. I think we have Dr. Ndulu on the line now. So if you can come up, and again, Obi, thank you so much for staying within the time. And I'm going to ask for all the other panelists to do the same, okay? If you can do 5 to 7 minutes, that would be great. There are a number of questions that have been asked. So Ndulu, please go ahead, and thanks for being on the call.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm very, very, very happy to be here. And I'm actually talking about celebrating Benno Ndulu, who has been quite a close friend. And now I'm in his shoes as the head of the African Economic Research Consortium. And that's where he was from 1992 to 1998. So I'm very happy that I've been there. But also in the 90s, we had quite a very interesting encounter, and even my co-author. So we have had a life together, and I'll take you through that life together that has worked very well. But the most important thing I recall, and I would like to appreciate Benno for, is actually how he helped the African Economic Research Consortium to become a very formidable capacity that actually has helped in the knowledge generation in Africa for the last 34 years now. And I do believe that that is where we are. Capacity building in Africa is required for policymaking. He saw that. It is important for institutions. He saw that. It's also important to supply governments with very formidable and well-qualified policymakers and policy analysts. And for me, that was very, very critical. It's going to be difficult to go through the life of Benno, and especially from my side and the academic life. But I would like to summarize it in several ways. One, Benno was a thought leader and he led Africa's development. And if you look at some of his work, some trails of his revolutionary contributions, Agenda for Africa's Economic Renewal in the 1990s, Growth and Adjustment in Sub-Saharan Africa in 1990s, New Directions in Development Economics in 1996 towards the end of the decade, and then Governance and Growth in Sub-Saharan Africa, which were very major important blueprints, and then the Political Economy of Economic Growth in Africa, and that was at the millennium. And for us, that's very, very important contribution. The second thing is that Benno was a leading innovator in capacity building. And what I perhaps presented in terms of AERC is actually his thought leadership in terms of how we can innovatively provide capacity building in Africa. And I was a young scholar at that time, around in the early 1990s, and that's when we started even working together. But I'm very, very excited. I was very excited every time I went to visit the office, him seeing a young researcher coming up after my PhD, and then all of a sudden we started working together. And in 1997, one of the major contributions we made was about the HIPIC initiative. And that time we argued that growth in Africa was actually being curtailed by the debt problem. And the debt problem was affecting private investments and then growth. And in fact, the private investments was actually acquiring a waiting option because of the kind of risks they were seeing in terms of accumulation of debt. And then the HIPIC initiative, we argued that time, was going to be a very important milestone to actually remove this waiting or disrobe the private sector from this waiting option. And for us, that was very, very critical. But then come Benno, the leading policy advisor, and that's all the way back. I remember he became governor in 2008. But before that, he was actually a deputy governor. I became governor of the Central Bank of Kenya in 2007, and we realized that together we were going to work together in a very difficult terrain. And of course, from his richness in terms of policy advisory, what actually has been said so far, I found that I was going to actually become a very good, should I say, student of Benno, even though I was also in the same role as reading in terms of central banking. But that became very, very important. And then became the policy leader. And I do remember that in the East African region, Benno led the way in terms of reformulating monetary policy, first in Tanzania, then we combined together in terms of the regional the monetary policy in the leading institutions in East African community and SADC. And I think this is also where we started also the payment system. And my argument that time was that electronic payment system was going to give us a very important dimension in terms of financial inclusion. And Tanzania led the path. And that's why you found that even after governorship, he was still in this, talking about the path to prosperity. And that's how he also joined the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Digital Pathways for Prosperity. That is a commission that he was reading in BSG in Oxford. Now, but then at a personal level, I've also found that Benno was a very close friend. And of course, even when we met and we actually decided sometimes we even could program ourselves in terms of where we meet, we would talk first in terms of friendship and then the next in terms of the work that we were doing. I recall Benno was the first governor in Africa to accept and replicate M-Pesa. M-Pesa is the mobile phone financial services transactions platform. And BOT was the second central bank in the world to actually replicate M-Pesa. I found him in my defense all the time when we were supposed to defend M-Pesa because everybody thought that a retail electronic payments platform was perhaps not, it needed a lot of safeguard. First, because I started and approved M-Pesa in Kenya, even though we had no payment system. But what we argued together was that it was going to be to help us in terms of the goal of financial inclusion. To date, if you look at Tanzania and Kenya, and you talk about financial inclusion, you will see that in a space of less than 10 years, we have covered quite a lot of ground. These two countries now are the most successful in terms of digital financial services. Financial inclusion inclusion and even electronic payments infrastructure. And we thank the strength and even the foresight that Benno and the rest of the policymakers listened to us, the ministers of finance listened to us, even the big banks listened to us. When we combined forces and realized that we needed to reformulate monetary policy with the support of IGC, we were very happy that since then, East African community countries have come up with a leading, should I say, monetary policy frameworks that are forward-looking, and we really like that. And finally, Benno supported me as the chair of, in the formation of Alliance for Financial Inclusion in 2009, AFI. AFI is a network of financial regulators that coordinated financial inclusion in Africa. In Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He later became chair, celebrated chair of AFI after I served, after I had left the chairmanship, and he pushed its expansion. To date, everybody who talks about financial inclusion in the world talks about how AFI has succeeded, and they remember Benno in terms of innovativeness. It is from all of us at the AERC network, we miss Benno, and we are going to continue honoring him because perhaps those who have been left behind, they are very little to do. We can always remember him constantly and even make sure that we have recurrent activities that are going to remember him. In fact, I was writing an email just before I joined this forum, and somebody had asked me, what are we going to do in the next biannual workshop in June for AERC? And I said it will be dedicated to Benno. And we are going to bring a range of researchers in sub-Saharan Africa who have been trained in the hands of Benno, and they are going to record a script or a short video in terms of remembering that. We'll do that, we'll produce a volume for him. We're also going to design scholarships for brilliant students in PhD, in Masters in Economics and Agricultural Economics, and every year we'll be doing that. That is the only way we can actually say, rest in peace, rest in eternal peace, our friend, and we'll remember you all the time whenever we talk about AERC, whenever we talk about policy leadership in Africa, whenever we talk about innovative leadership, and whenever we talk about institutional leadership. That is what differentiated Bank of Tanzania with the rest of the banks in this region. And I do believe, I think also His Honorable President Kikwete, I think that leeway, that space was very, very important. And I still cherish the leadership of President Kikwete in terms of giving us that chance to show the way forward. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for taking more time than I had anticipated.
No worries. Thank you to Njuguna. Thank you for all your words. I still remember, I think it was 2012 in Njuguna when you came to NYU Abu Dhabi. You were Central Bank Governor. Benno was there. If you remember, President Rawlings was there. President Rawlings passed away just a few months ago, as you know. And I remember commending you, commending Tanzania, commending His Excellency at that time for allowing the mobile money systems to go. Benno was very big into technology and mobile payments. So count us in, AFI, anything we can do to help, we will, okay? So thank you for that. And Njuguna, I just wanted to recognize Bob Holmes, Africa House Board, Eddie Bergman, Africa House Board Member, Mike Thoyer, Africa House Board Member, and Judith Adu, board members. They are on the call. Thank you for all you do for us. And next, I would like to call up my colleague. He was with me in this last lunch we had at the Bergman family. And so, Bill, if you're here, please give your words. Professor of Economics and co-director of NYU's Developer Research Institute. Bill, over to you, and Bill's CV and all his wonderful works are going to show up on the chat in a second.
Okay, thank you, Yao.
All right.
Thank you. So I first met Benno around 3 decades ago, an embarrassingly long time, at a meeting of the AERC in Nairobi. And that's a supremely happy memory of getting to know Benno that enriched my life for the 30 years afterwards. Benno, of course, as I'm going to discuss, was a great economist with great insights into Africa's economic growth. But also I want to stress how much he was how impressive and amazing he was as a person, as a man. he had this incredible kindness and modesty and kind of low-key approach, which and humility, which did not fully reflect his own greatness as an economist, but it was very attractive and impressive that he can combine so much talent with so much humility and kindness and courtesy to all of us as his colleagues. And I think that has shown up in the words of the other panelists that we have had today, whose speeches I really learned a lot from and really appreciated. So Benno, from what I remember him in the 90s, he was a clear voice that pointed out that part of Africa's lagging growth behind the rest of the world had to do with economic policies. And he clearly identified some of the more destructive economic policies, such as extreme state controls on the economy that led to lagging economic growth. So for example, in his writings, I have a quote that the impact of poor policy accounts for something between 1/4 and 1/2 of the difference in growth between African and non-African developing countries. Roughly, he identified the lag accounted for by the syndrome of poor economic policy as accounting for about 2 percentage points difference in growth between Africa and what Africa could be with the relaxation and reform of these policies, which then indeed Benno was very instrumental in contributing to himself as an intellectual leader and as a policymaker himself in Tanzania. At the same time, Benno was not at all a kind of pro-reform or pro-market ideologue. I saw this sentence that I saw in his writings that I remember him stressing in the 1990s also. He has this phrase that I want to quote. He says, the recognition, he had the recognition that structural and market-oriented reforms tended to be astonishingly slow in producing positive effects. That's a typical Benno sort of understatement, soft, low-key, but delivering a huge whammy. The recognition that structural and market-oriented reforms tended to be astonishingly slow in producing positive effects. So Benno was a very honest observer of the growth picture. He himself believed that economic reforms would have some positive impact, but then he acknowledged that the first years of reform, as reform started to happen in the 1990s and early years of the new millennium, that the growth response was disappointing. And he was, among those who pointed out that the kind of extreme optimism of the Washington consensus reforms was kind of overstated. And I think he made another great point in which he himself was very instrumental in, which is that the Washington consensus type reforms did not work well when they were kind of foisted on the African continent by outsiders from the World Bank and the IMF. And that it was really important that these reforms be led by African leaders and African policymakers. And that's indeed exactly what Benno wound up doing himself as an intellectual leader in Africa and as a policymaker, as central bank governor in Tanzania. So his own life embodies the great principles that he, in his research, was reflecting. And then I want to close with one other contribution of Benno that I found very, very inspirational and impressive. He was very much a proponent of what we might call kind of enlightenment values of political and economic freedom for all people of all continents, of all people everywhere. And in his work, he pointed out the correlation between this extreme state controls that he thought were destructive and the presence of autocratic rule. So here's another quote from his research. 80% of autocratic leaderships over the entire period of African economic history have coexisted with control regimes, whereas 70% of democratic regimes have coexisted with syndrome-free, meaning free of extreme control, growth episodes that had a happier result. And so he was not only celebrating economic reforms, but also celebrating democratic reforms within Africa that have been such an important part of Africa's recent history. He also stressed very much that African values were very similar to world values on the issue of democracy. He found that from quoting data from the World Values Survey, Benno found that that the percentage of people who believe that having a strong leader was bad or who does not bother with parliament and elections was either very bad or fairly bad in 65% of the African respondents in the values survey. And this was no different or even higher than in the rest of the world. So he was very much in favor of what he would have called, he called African values, in favor of both political and economic freedom, of equal respect for all people. And let me just have one last quote of his from his research that stressed this. Recent world values, that Africans share recent world values which favor a state supportive of the private sector and markets, but also in favor of democratic practices and caring for the unfortunate. So this preference for increasingly egalitarian approaches to development and growth is one that Benno very much supported. And so Benno, I'm so sorry that we have lost you. I'm going to remember you so much for the important role you played in my life, both personally and professionally. I remember when Benno came to the NYU in 2018 to visit Africa House, he was very encouraging to me in my own research in a way that I found very inspirational. And we had many great conversations about these themes that I've just discussed with you, about his support for pro-market reforms, but at the same time, a healthy skepticism and eclecticism about not being in favor of extreme orthodoxy, just being in favor of the pragmatic approach to what would work, but also supporting the values of freedom for all people. So Benno, I celebrate you. I'm going to miss you. Let's have a warm round of support and applause for Benno. Thank you very much.
There you go. Thank you so much, Bill. That was wonderful. Really touching. So Bill, I have a suggestion here from somebody. So maybe after this, Bill and I and our team will talk. So I won't mention her name, but she's a colleague, used to come to our Africa House events, and we're trying to loop her into our Africa House in NYU Abu Dhabi. And she says, Professor Ndulu Njuguna has outlined the role of Benno in far-reaching capacity building in the area of economic policy through the AERC. I am an AERC alumni. How can Africa House collaborate with AERC to set up a Benno Ndulu speaker series? Okay, so that's what she said. All right, so Njuguna, let's talk afterwards. Bill, let's talk afterwards. And maybe President, His Excellency President Kikwete can find some people to give us some money to actually host this thing. Okay, this America and everything runs by money. So we'll talk to His Excellency for his friends in the United States. Okay, but I think it's a wonderful idea. So our colleague who said that, Bill, will talk about this. So thank you so much. Great job, Bill. All right. So next, we go to one of Benno's longtime co-authors, has worked with him, a specialist on Africa. He spent some time at the USAID. So Professor Stephen O'Connell, can you please come up? His CV will show up in the chats in a second. So Stephen.
Thank you very much, Yao. And it's really a great honor to be on this panel following His Excellency President Kikwete and other distinguished panelists to honor Benno Ndulu, who I think for me was simultaneously a great man and a very trusted personal friend, I think, as for many people. So I have an eye on the time here. I'm going to compress a little bit in order to just make a few points that are additional to those already made. Benno championed the credible internal voice of the economist in African affairs his entire career. And he marked that rollout very, very early at the University of Dar-es-Salaam already by the mid-1980s. I'll just tell you a quick story. When I first met him in '86, he invited me to a panel that afternoon that he was participating in. This is 1 year after President Nyerere had resigned and Tanzania had done a maxi devaluation of the shilling after a long debate. And the debate was between an eminent Marxist scholar, Issa Shivji, and two young economists, Benno and his colleague, Nguyuru Lipumba. And Shivji went first, and he just had the audience in his hands on the poignant tragedy of the demise of socialism in Tanzania. And Benno just didn't take up that level of discussion. He talked about the devaluation, and he made three straight economics points. There was going to be a supply response of smallholders. It was not going to be inflationary, and it would reduce rural poverty. And what he was really doing at a deeper level, as I've appreciated much more in retrospect, is he was introducing into the script credible economic analysis of the absolute high-level policy decisions Tanzania was engaged in, and he was insisting that that analysis had to be evidence-based, and it had to focus on the welfare of common people, of ordinary people in Tanzania. And he took that vision forward and amplified it throughout his whole career, the AERC being the most dramatic single example of that, building capacity to elevate that voice throughout the continent. I'll just say one thing about what it has been like to collaborate with Benno. We started collaborating on research and policy around 1990 together. It has been an absolute fixed point of my career to have this access to and interaction with Benno. He had no axe to grind. I think Bill has communicated this. In particular, during the 1990s, which were an absolutely heated area of new understanding of the African growth challenge, Benno had no time for the single explanation debates that were going on. Institutions versus geography, ethnic diversity versus resource endowments, X versus Y. He really steered a more complex path of appreciating the political economy of policy. I think his most characteristic statement about inclusive growth, to use Obi's phrase that was so central to Benno's thinking, was the book he wrote at the bank, probably while he was interacting with Obi and Bill every day, called Challenges of African Growth in the late 90s. And he just brought forward the 4 I's: investment climate, infrastructure, promotion of innovation through ICT and higher education, and the strengthening of institutional capacity. Okay, we can debate, but those are 4 very good I's, and you need 4 of them, and you need to have a belief in the possibility in a contextualized situation, as His Excellency so beautifully outlined, that economists can work with policymakers and work with outside stakeholders in a way that keeps an eye on what's possible and moves things forward in a determined way. I'll just end by echoing the extraordinary characterization of Benno that I hear from everyone is certainly true to my experience of this dear man. He was a man of great integrity and generosity. He was a mentor to everyone he came into contact with, quite simply, all the way from his peers to, as President Kikwete has so generously said, his superiors, so to speak, in public life, and then all the way down to the staff workers at the Bank of Tanzania and the AERC, and to myself. So yeah, thank you very, very much for this opportunity. And I'll close there. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Stephen. Really nice of you to have said all of that. Thank you, Stephen. Okay, so we've heard from all of our speakers. I think, Zoom rules say that you should try and keep it to 1 hour. We're already 1 hour and 17 minutes. What I'll do is this: I'll read very quickly some of the comments. And if any of our panelists would like to say something, add something, please do so, and then we'll just wrap it all up. I know that, with Zoom, it's very, very hard to follow. People may get antsy a little bit, but let's do that, okay? So some of the comments, I want to take this opportunity to thank late Professor Ndulu. He was very helpful when I was conducting my PhD research. I'm now a PhD graduate. Without him, it would have been impossible to finish my PhD. Okay, mentioned something about financial inclusion of mobile money. A question for His Excellency President Jakaya M. Kikwete. I am a Zambian student of international relations studying at Kile University. I fondly remember spending my early childhood in Tanzania, and I would like to express my gratitude for your efforts in peace and security spanning from the Burundian Civil War to the post-electoral violence in Kenya 2007. Goes on to thank you some more. That's the comment there. One, and then we had the comment about the book of, so I'm gonna get permission from all of you. We'll get all of your comments together and let's see if we can write something in his honor, okay, based on the comments today, okay? So we'll try that, and Bill, maybe we'll have a conversation, see if we can do it through Africa House DRI, okay? How does Benno and his character compare to the growing contingent of populist economists in Africa? Okay. Was part of Benno's success driven by his ability to effectively engage the West? Is he lauded because of Western adoration or knowing the West well enough to negotiate on behalf of Africa? Okay. Just thanking you for the great topic that's being discussed now. I mentioned the speaker series from my sister in the audience, a Benno Ndulu speaker series. So Bill will discuss that maybe with you in Jugana. I think it'll be a great thing to do, okay? Thank you so much for organizing this event. It was like having a piece of home. It is incredible to be able to share this space and hear from African elders. I love African elders, I love and admire. You're a great inspiration. Asanteni sana sana. Okay. So those are our comments. And so any final words from any of you on the panel? Anything you want to add? Just speak up. Any final words? Any responses? Yes, Njuguna, go ahead.
Yes, I think I'm going to add a voice in terms of the future work. And I think we are all lined up, and especially coming from the AERC, where we are going to continue meeting with various researchers in Africa and beyond. And we're going to make sure that we have a platform that we can talk and try to make sure that we have a structured discussion series. And I think Steve and I and the rest of the teams, we're going to do that. It's nice to see you, Bill. Yesterday, I met you very many years. And nice to meet Obi. And we were very happy when we were seeing her at the Central Bank, at the World Bank. Let me say that Benno's influence and even his own cultivation does not actually come from the West. He actually was already a very well-polished economist by the time he even left the AERC. It is because of his leadership and also innovativeness that everybody found a comfort in him, especially for last young researchers then. So I would say that the West, for me, it is not the West. It's actually how innovatively he led African institutions to that glory. And it continued even to the Central Bank of Tanzania. It continued even in other organizations that he went in. It's very important to look at it because he was also a critic of the Washington Consensus. So it's, in a sense, you can look at it in terms of like what Steve has said, the 4 I's, they are really, really domesticated in terms of the experiences he saw, not only in Tanzania, but also in the East African economies and even Africa at large. Don't forget, he was actually an advisor in South Africa when it was still in the apartheid period. They actually groomed several South African economists who would take leadership after that. And it is something that even today we celebrate. Thank you very much, Yao. Sorry for taking the time.
Oh, that's good. Okay, any last comment from our panelists? His Excellency, Mr. President.
Well, yeah, mine is really expression of appreciation. Well, I thank you, Yao, for organizing this and for organizing this so well. Well, to talk about a person that I have a very high respect, very high regard for, a person whom as Stephen has just said, he was mentoring even those who were his seniors, because I'm saying when I was sitting with Benno and we discussed issues, different issues, but one of the things we used to discuss was, as I think as Obi said, when you look at the GDP growth rates in Tanzania, very impressive. But why is the poverty reduction rate is not at the same level? And then we sat down and discussed, and Benno said, look here, one thing that you should know, look at the structure of the growth. Financial intermediation, maybe 20%. Mobile phone is about 19. This one is 19. But look at agriculture. The sector that employs the majority of the people. Its growth rate is 4%. So you see, all the 7% is actually contributed mainly by those other sectors, the transit trade and so on. But when it comes to agriculture, the sector that the majority of the people depend on, when it grows at 4%, and they say this is where the problem really is. If we can unlock agriculture, yes, if we can unlock agriculture, get it to 6-7%, it will make a hell lot of difference. I was saying, if an economy grows, or a sector grows at 7% for a decade, the GDP doubles. So that's why we started really working on agriculture. We took a number of initiatives on how to transform our agricultural sector. Of course, it takes time because it's very slow in terms of transformation, but at the end of the day, we were able, now I think we are now beginning to see the benefits. At least agriculture now is getting to 5 and 6%. So he was that kind of a person, very thoughtful, very careful. He takes time to think, and he can come up with a problem. Of course, well, I was just saying thank you, Yao. Thank you, Africa House. I'm very much associated with Africa House. And thank you everybody else who participated in this and all those who asked questions. Well, hope we find someday talk about either Benno or somebody else, or about Africa's growth and development.
All right. So thank you, Mr. President. So on that note, want to thank you, Your Excellency, for your support over all of the years. And yes, we look forward to seeing you in the fall, or if we're not back in person, at least hearing from you. I know the book is coming out and we are all dying to hear from you. By the way, we're getting lots of emails about it. People are asking me questions all the time. So thank you. Thank you for spending the time. I know it's Ramadan time as well, which adds its additional complications. So thank you for that, Mr. President. Again, the Bergman family, thank you, Stan. Thank you, Mariam. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you for all you do for us. In Jugana, thank you with Bill. We'll be in touch with you. And let's see if we can do this speaker series or speaker something, technology, mobile payments, all the things he cared about, okay? So thank you for that. Obi, thank you too for being here. Wish you well and look forward to continuing our collaborations. I still remember going with you in the Bergman family, visiting New York and talking economics. So thank you for that. Bill, thanks for coming here. We have more work to do. We're going to put together notes on this thing as other professor just mentioned, and deal with all the other things. And Stephen, thank you too for everything, and for being here, for your nice words. For my team, Andrea, Aditi, Nathan, the whole Africa House team, thank you for coming here. And for the hundreds of you who registered, and those of you who attended, and those of you who are going to see all of this recorded online, thank you all. So I think Benno, wherever he is right now, is looking down upon us, and I'm sure he's very happy with what we've done today. So thank you all for coming. And so on that note, I will, if His Excellency will allow me, I will end this meeting here today. Okay. So thank you all for coming. Okay. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.